everybody, this is JT Sports Match, you guys, with another video. In this video, I'm here with who the Pittsburgh Steelers should target in free agency. And before I begin, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, because I upload NFL videos, XFL videos, and college football videos daily. So, players the Pittsburgh Steelers should target in free agency. Now, quick disclaimer. I'm seeing a lot of Steelers fans, Pittsburgh Steelers fan pages on Instagram, Steelers fans on YouTube talking about how the Steelers should go after Jadeveon Clowney or tight end Hunter Henry and big name guys, right? And let me tell you guys something. The first thing is, as long as I've been a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I've been a Pittsburgh Steelers fan my whole entire life. Since I was 8 years old. I'm 17 years old now. And out of all my years of watching and being a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Pittsburgh Steelers have never been known to be going after the biggest names in free agency. All the signings that the Pittsburgh Steelers always make in free agency are signings that nobody really looks at, really. They just be like, oh, they signed him, that's a nice piece. A good example of that is cornerback Steven Nelson. Now, last year I made a video on this channel about how Steven Nelson was a very good signing. And a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers fans just look at, he's alright. And Steven Nelson ended up being really, really good this year. And another thing is, the Pittsburgh Steelers don't really attack free agency that heavily. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers' biggest free agent signing the past decade was probably cornerback Joe Hayden. And that was a couple of seasons back. So the Pittsburgh Steelers don't really attack free agency heavy. So please stop saying that the Pittsburgh Steelers need to get this guy, they're going to get this guy. The Pittsburgh Steelers, that's not what they do. They get guys who fit the system, high personality guys, good in the locker room and things like that, and guys that will not break the bank, and pretty much guys who are really underrated. And also, the Pittsburgh Steelers don't really have a lot of money to spend in free agency. They actually, I don't even think they have enough money to spend in free agency at all. They are, what, $2 million behind in the salary cap, or $2 million below the salary cap. So, a lot of these guys on these lists are going to be guys who won't demand huge salaries, and guys who the Pittsburgh Steelers can basically give 1-year deals to or short-term deals to until they're able to maneuver the cap situation and things like that. So the first guy that I have on this list, I have edge rusher or pass rusher, Vic Beasley. Now, Vic Beasley in 2019, he had 8 sacks and 42 tackles. Now, the Atlanta Falcons were willing to part ways with them because simply it just hasn't worked out. Ever since Vic Beasley had that big 15-sack season the year the Atlanta Falcons went to the Super Bowl, he hasn't really did anything since. And I think Vic Beasley will be a pretty good pickup for the Pittsburgh Steelers, simply for the fact that the Steelers will not be able to bring back Vance McDonald. They won't be able to bring back Bud Dupree. I mean, they could, but Bud Dupree is probably going to get a max contract somewhere. Vince McDonald probably will get a pretty good contract as well. Pittsburgh probably won't be able to match that. So Vic Beasley is a guy who I don't think he'll demand a pretty reasonable contract, but I think Pittsburgh, if they're able to maneuver the cap, they could be able to bring in a guy like Vic Beasley. Now, Vic Beasley, the good thing about Vic Beasley is that a lot of teams are going to be trying to bring him in on 1-year prove-it deals. So he's not really going to get a big salary. So Vic Beasley could look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. He could be like, although they're not offering the same amount of money on this 1-year contract as some of these other teams are, have a good chance to succeed on this 1-year deal. If I do good, which I should, because you're going to have Stephon Tuitt, Javon Hargrave, you got Cameron Hayward. So, I mean, you're going to have a lot of good players playing on that defensive line for the Pittsburgh Steelers that's going to be able to give you ample opportunities to increase your stats, increase your sack count, end up helping you cash out next season after the 2020 NFL season. So I think Vic Beasley will be a good target for the Pittsburgh Steelers to target the free agency, simply for the fact that I don't think he's going to demand a huge salary or a huge market, and I think he will be a pretty good fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Although he's a little bit of a hit-and-miss prospect, a little bit of a hit-and-miss player, I still think Mike Tomlin and this Pittsburgh Steelers coaching staff could bring the best out of Vic Beasley. Another player who I think the Pittsburgh Steelers should target in free agency, who I don't think will command a huge market, is outside linebacker Carl Nassib. Now, Carl Nassib played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this past season. He had 34 tackles, 6 sacks. Now, he's a little bit of an underrated guy. He's a little bit of an undersized guy. I think he's only like 230 pounds or 245 pounds or something like that. So he's not really big and juicy, but he's a really fast speed rusher. He gives you speed on the outside. And I think he's a guy who's not going to demand a huge salary. And like I said, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers, if they could find a way to work and maneuver their salary cap a little bit, I think NASSIB will be a really good addition to this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And also, he's an underrated player. 6 sacks, 34 tackles. I think that's a really good stat line. And I think he's a player who could come in for Pittsburgh and produce right away. And he's pretty consistent. He's a guy that who could give you 6, 7 sacks on the year in and year out basic. He's more of a consistent player than what Vic Beasley is. With Vic Beasley, it's just upside, really. You don't really know what to expect from Vic Beasley. Vic Beasley could be a guy who gets 10 sacks, or maybe he gets 3 sacks. So he's a little bit more consistent. He's not as a big hit-or-miss player such as a guy like Vic Beasley is, and also he's not a guy who I think is going to command a huge salary in free agency. And I think he's a guy, if Pittsburgh is able to find a way around their cap limitations, that he could be a good pickup for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, moving on to the offensive side of the ball, I have tight end CLIVE WALFORD. Now, CLIVE WALFORD is a guy that Pittsburgh, this is pretty much the most realistic target out of any player on this list, simply for the fact that CLIVE WALFORD is probably a guy you would probably bring him in on a 1-year deal, probably give him the veteran minimum. Well, I think the veteran minimum for an NFL contract is like, what, $700,000, things like that. So, with the Pittsburgh Steelers being in their cap situation, $2 million below the cap, I think CLIVE WALFORD could be a realistic signing for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because one thing is he's not going to put a huge dent in the cap hit or in the salary cap. And another thing is that I think CLIVE WALFORD playing with an organization like the Pittsburgh Steelers in his offense, I think he could thrive, because the Pittsburgh Steelers have the way of making stars. When you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, they develop stars, or they get underrated guys in free agency, and they become really good players. And I think that's what CLIVE WALFORD could become, because he's a really athletic tight end. He's like a discount version of O.J. Howard. He's athletic, he's fast, he's also very good in the ball in his hands. But the thing that's held him back the most is I think injuries hasn't really held him back. It's just the fact that the production hasn't really been there, because I think he's been limited by the quarterback play. He played with the Dolphins, he played with the Oakland Raiders, and I think playing with Ben Roethlisberger, that could end up helping elevate a guy like a CLIVE WALFORD. We've seen Ben Roethlisberger do this throughout his career, elevate guys who haven't really had good careers, then they come in and produce right away with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think that's what CLIVE WALFORD could do with Big Ben coming back fully healthy from his injury. And I think CLIVE WALFORD, I think he could be a reasonable target more than any other player on this list, simply for the fact that you can give him the veteran minimum, give him a 1-year deal, and I think he's a guy who can have success in this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. And the last guy that I have on this list, I have tight end Luke Wilson. Now, Luke Wilson, he's on the older end of the spectrum. He's like 31 years old. But he's still a guy who I think you give him the veteran minimum as well. You give him like a $750,000 contract on a 1-year deal. He can come in, he can have some production. And I think Luke Wilson could be a very good addition. Now, he's not as athletic as a guy like a Vince McDonald is, or a guy like a CLIVE WALFORD is, but he's still good enough that he could make a couple of defenders miss with the ball in his hands. But also, I think he could be a really good third down target for Ben Roethlisberger. And if you watch Big Roethlisberger over the past, he targets his tight ends a lot on third downs. His tight ends are his safety blankets on third down. And Luke Wilson has pretty reliable hands. So I think Luke Wilson, you bring Luke Wilson in not for his athletic ability, but because of his reliable hands and his ability to be a good target on third downs for Ben Roethlisberger coming back. So these are my players who I think the Pittsburgh Steelers should target in free agency. And like I said, the Pittsburgh Steelers don't really have a lot of they don't have any cap space at all. They're $2 million below the cap. So if the Pittsburgh Steelers want to bring in a guy like a Vic Beasley or bring in a guy like a NASSIB, they're going to have to maneuver their cap space around a little bit. Probably going to have to make a couple of roster cuts, probably make a couple of players make like a roster cut or something like that, or a salary cut or something like that to the contracts or anything like that. And they want to sign some of these guys like a Vic Beasley or like a NASSIB. But some of these guys like Luke Wilson or a guy like a CLIVE WALFORD, I think could be fairly reasonable players. So let me know who you guys think the Pittsburgh Steelers should target and free agency down in the comment section down below. Also make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and content. And thanks for watching.